Hello everyone.
About 70% of the friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did.
I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Story 1. I woke up to the sound of my phone's alarm, but instead of the usual beeping, a whisper filled the room. It was a low, breathy voice saying, "Wake up," over and over again. My heart pounded as I scrambled to grab my phone from the nightstand. The screen showed the alarm app open, but I had never set it to anything like this. My fingers trembled as I silenced it, the eerie voice cutting off abruptly. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I checked the alarm settings, expecting to find some kind of glitch, but nothing looked unusual. The ringtone was set to the default sound, not the whisper I had just heard. I scrolled through my files, searching for any recording that could explain it, but there was nothing. A chill crept down my spine as I realized there was no logical reason for what had just happened. I had gone to bed like normal, my phone resting where it always did, untouched. I set the phone down and sat up, rubbing my face as I tried to shake the unease settling over me. Maybe I had been dreaming, caught between sleep and wakefulness, my mind playing tricks on me. The thought was somewhat comforting, but deep down I did not believe it. The voice had been too clear, too deliberate. It was not my imagination. I took a deep breath and decided to reset my phone, hoping that whatever had caused it would be gone by morning. The rest of the day passed without anything strange happening. I tried to push the morning's event to the back of my mind, convincing myself that it was just a glitch or some forgotten setting. By the time night came, I almost believed it. I double-checked my alarm before going to sleep, setting it to the default tone again. I placed my phone face down on the nightstand and turned off the light, determined to get a good night's rest. I jolted awake to the whisper again, my skin prickling with fear. "Wake up, wake up, wake up." The voice was even softer this time, almost like it was right beside me. I snatched my phone and shut off the alarm, my breathing ragged. The room was completely still, but the silence only made me more aware of my racing heartbeat. I gripped the phone tightly, staring at the screen as if it would give me answers. I went straight to my settings, checking everything again, but nothing had changed. There was no recording, no custom sound file, nothing that could explain the whispering. My hands were shaking as I turned on the flashlight and scanned the room. The closet door was shut, the windows locked, and nothing seemed out of place. Yet the feeling of being watched clung to me, refusing to fade. I could not stay in my bedroom after that. I took my phone and went to the living room, turning on the television for background noise. I stayed up for hours, too afraid to sleep, afraid that I would hear the voice again. At some point, exhaustion took over, and I drifted off on the couch. When I woke up in the morning, the phone was still in my hand, the screen dark. I knew I had to do something. The first thing I did was delete every alarm on my phone, wiping the settings completely. Then I reset the entire device, erasing everything just to be safe. The process took time, but I did not care. I needed to make sure there was no trace of whatever had caused the whispering. When the reset was complete, I set up my phone from scratch, avoiding any old settings that might have carried over. That night, I hesitated before setting an alarm again. My fingers hovered over the screen before I finally selected a simple tune. I placed the phone on the table across the room instead of next to me, hoping that distance would help ease my nerves. As I lay in bed, I listened carefully, every little creak and rustle making me tense. Morning came and the alarm rang like normal. No whisper, no eerie voice, just the usual sound I had chosen. Relief flooded through me, but a small part of me remained wary. I did not know what had caused it or if it would ever happen again. All I could do was stay alert and trust that I had done enough to put an end to it. Story 2. It was late in the evening when I stepped outside to take the trash to the curb. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, the ground still wet from an earlier rain. The street was quiet, the distant hum of crickets filling the empty spaces between the dim glow of streetlights. As I walked toward the driveway, something caught my eye, a bright, steady beam cutting through the darkness. A flashlight lay on the ground, its beam fixed toward the tree line at the edge of my property. I stopped, my heart beating a little faster. There was no reason for it to be there. I had not used a flashlight, and I doubted anyone in the neighborhood would have casually dropped one in my driveway. The way it was positioned, perfectly angled toward the woods, sent a chill through me. I stood frozen for a moment, scanning the area for movement. My house sat at the end of a quiet road, with thick trees forming a natural barrier beyond my backyard. The woods were dense and deep, stretching for miles in every direction. Even in daylight, they felt endless. At night, they became an abyss. I bent down to pick up the flashlight, my fingers tightening around the cold metal. It was heavier than I expected, the grip worn as if well used. The beam was strong, cutting through the darkness with unsettling precision. I turned toward the woods, following the path of light. The trees stood still, their branches reaching upward like skeletal fingers. A part of me wanted to turn off the light and go back inside. Another part could not ignore the feeling that something was waiting just beyond the trees. The rational side of my mind told me to forget about it. It was probably a coincidence, nothing more. But the longer I stood there, the more uneasy I became. I aimed the flashlight deeper into the woods, sweeping the beam from left to right. The undergrowth was thick, the fallen leaves damp and undisturbed. But then something shifted, a flicker of movement just beyond the reach of the light. My breath caught as I strained to see. A shape, barely visible, lingered between the trees. It was not an animal, at least not one I recognized. It stood too still, too deliberate. The air around me seemed to grow colder as I took a step back, my grip tightening on the flashlight. My instinct screamed at me to turn and leave, but my feet stayed rooted in place. The beam wavered slightly as my hand trembled. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the swaying branches. But then it moved again, shifting just enough for me to know it was real. The silence around me deepened, pressing against my ears with an unnatural weight. I swallowed hard and forced myself to step back. Whatever was out there, I did not want to find out. I turned off the flashlight and started toward my front door, my pulse hammering. Every step felt like an eternity, my back prickling with the feeling of being watched. The moment I stepped inside and locked the door, the tension in my chest eased slightly. But as I stood in the quiet of my home, a thought struck me: who had left the flashlight there in the first place? Was it meant to warn me, or was it meant to lure me closer? I placed the flashlight on the kitchen counter and tried to shake the unease settling deep in my bones. The night stretched on, my mind replaying the scene over and over. Eventually exhaustion won and I drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning I stepped outside, my heart pounding as I glanced toward the woods. The trees stood undisturbed, bathed in the soft light of dawn. But something was different. The flashlight was gone. I searched the driveway, the yard, even the edge of the woods, but there was no trace of it. The only proof that it had ever been there was the lingering feeling of unease that refused to fade. For days, I could not shake the thought that someone or something had been in those woods, watching. I made sure to keep my doors locked, my curtains drawn once night fell. But no matter how much I tried to forget, I knew deep down that the flashlight had not been left there by accident. Whoever had placed it there had wanted me to see something, and whoever had taken it back wanted to make sure I never did. Story 3. A. The steady hum of the washing machine echoed through the house as I stepped into the laundry room. The sound was unmistakable, the low, rhythmic churn of clothes tumbling inside. At first, I assumed I had simply forgotten that I had started a load earlier, but as I stood there, staring at the vibrating machine, something felt off. The lid was closed, the digital display lit up, and the timer was counting down as if it had been running for a while. I reached out hesitantly, pressing the pause button. The machine beeped and came to a slow stop. I lifted the lid, expecting to find a pile of my clothes soaking in the soapy water. Instead, the drum was empty. No water, no clothes, nothing at all. A strange chill ran through me as I stared down at the bare metal interior. I closed the lid and checked the settings, but nothing looked unusual. It had been running on a normal cycle, yet I had no memory of starting it. I tried to recall my morning, wondering if I had absent-mindedly started a load and then forgotten to add clothes. That seemed unlikely. I had been in the kitchen the entire time, preparing breakfast and sipping coffee. I checked my phone to see if anyone else had been home earlier, but there were no missed calls or messages. I lived alone, and no one had a spare key. The thought made my stomach tighten. I scanned the room, looking for any signs that someone had been inside. The detergent bottles were in their usual spots, and the laundry basket sat untouched in the corner. There was no reason for the machine to have been running on its own. I decided to reset it, unplugging the machine for a moment before plugging it back in. The digital display blinked before going dark, as if the cycle had never happened. I waited a few seconds, then powered it back on. It was back to normal, displaying the default settings. Forcing myself to stay calm, I told myself it had to be some kind of electrical glitch. Maybe a power surge had triggered the machine to start on its own. That explanation made sense, but it still did not sit right with me. Later that evening, I could not shake the uneasy feeling. The house was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards. Every time I passed the laundry room, I felt a strange pull toward the machine, as if I needed to check it again. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my usual routine, but the feeling lingered. Before heading to bed, I made sure the laundry machine was unplugged. I even pulled it slightly away from the wall, just to be certain. I stood there for a moment, staring at the lifeless machine, convincing myself that it was over. Whatever had caused it to turn on earlier was done. I turned off the light and headed to bed, pushing the thought out of my mind. At some point during the night, I woke up to a faint humming sound. My heart pounded as I listened closely, hoping I had imagined it. But there was that same rhythmic churn, muffled through the walls. The laundry machine was running again. I sat up, my breath caught in my throat. The house was dark and still, yet that sound persisted, steady and unchanging. I knew I had unplugged it. There was no way it could be running. I reached for my phone and checked the time. It was just past 3 in the morning. I hesitated, trying to decide whether I should go check or stay in bed and pretend I had not heard it. Gathering my courage, I slowly got up and made my way toward the laundry room. My footsteps were cautious, the floor creaking under my weight. As I approached, the sound grew louder. I flicked on the light, and there it was, the washing machine, running as if it had never been unplugged. The lid was locked, the cycle in progress. The same digital timer counted down, but I could not tell when it had started. A cold wave of fear settled over me as I reached for the cord. It was still unplugged. The machine was not even connected to power. My fingers trembled as I yanked open the lid, forcing it past the lock mechanism. The drum was empty once again, spinning slowly before coming to a halt. My pulse hammered in my ears as I backed away, my mind racing for an explanation. I grabbed my phone and searched for logical reasons. Electrical issues? Some kind of malfunction? But the fact that the machine had been running while unplugged ruled out any reasonable cause. I felt an overwhelming urge to leave the house, but I did not want to abandon my home over something I could not explain. The next morning, I called an electrician. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, leaving out the part about it running without power. He checked everything: wiring, outlets, even the internal mechanisms of the machine. Everything was normal. There were no faulty connections, no signs of a short circuit. He assured me the machine was in perfect working condition. I asked if a power surge could have caused it to turn on, but he shook his head. If that had happened, the machine would have shut down once the surge was over. It should not have been able to start a cycle on its own. He suggested replacing the control board, just in case, but he admitted he had never seen anything like this before. After he left, I made the decision to get rid of the machine. I could not live with something I could not understand. I listed it for free online, and within a few hours someone came to take it. I watched as they loaded it into their truck, feeling a strange sense of relief. That night, the house felt lighter. The silence was comforting, no strange humming, no unexplained noises. I slept soundly for the first time in days. The next morning, I stepped into the laundry room, expecting it to feel empty without the machine. But instead, I felt nothing at all. No lingering unease, no sense of something watching me. I never heard from the person who took the machine, and I never asked. Whatever had happened, it was gone now. I replaced the laundry machine with a new one a week later, and it never turned on by itself. I never spoke about it again, and I never tried to find out why it had happened. Some things are better left unexplored. Story 4. I walked out to my car in the morning, expecting another routine start to the day. The air was crisp, and the streets were quiet, just as they always were. As I approached my car, something caught my eye on the driver's side door. At first, I thought it was just a streak of dirt or a reflection of light, but as I got closer, I realized it was something much worse. Scratched into the paint, deep enough that I could see the bare metal underneath, were 3 chilling words. "I see you. I see you." My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the message, my mind struggling to make sense of it. The letters were jagged, uneven, as if carved hastily but deliberately. I reached out to touch the grooves, feeling the rough edges where the paint had been stripped away. My heart pounded as I looked around, scanning the street, the neighboring houses, the windows of nearby buildings. There was no one in sight. Panic settled in as I tried to piece together how this had happened. I had parked my car outside my apartment last night, just like always. I was sure there had been nothing unusual when I locked the doors and went inside. Had someone been watching me? Was this a threat? A prank? I checked the rest of the car, my hands shaking slightly. There were no other markings, no signs of forced entry. Just those 3 words, burned into the metal like a warning. I took out my phone and snapped a picture, unsure of what to do next. Reporting it seemed like the logical step, but what would I even say? That someone had vandalized my car. That I felt unsafe. Would they even take it seriously? I hesitated for a moment before deciding to file a report anyway. It was better to have it documented in case something else happened. As I drove to work, I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I stopped at a red light, I found myself glancing at the cars around me, wondering if one of the drivers had been the one to leave the message. I scanned the sidewalks, the alleys, the reflective glass of storefronts, but nothing seemed out of place. Still, the unease stayed with me, a gnawing sensation in the back of my mind. At work, I tried to focus, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the message. I replayed the events of the previous night, searching for anything out of the ordinary. Had I noticed any strange cars? Had I heard anything unusual? Nothing stood out. By the time my shift ended, I felt drained, exhausted from the constant paranoia. Driving home, I was more aware of my surroundings than ever before. I took different turns, watching for any cars that seemed to follow the same route. When I pulled into my usual parking spot, I sat in the car for a moment, scanning the area. Everything looked normal. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, and the distant hum of traffic was the only sound. I stepped out of the car cautiously, my keys clutched tightly in my hand. As I approached my apartment building, a shiver ran down my spine. The sensation of being watched was stronger now, an almost physical weight pressing against my back. I turned quickly, expecting to see someone lurking nearby, but there was no one. Just the empty street and the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. That night, sleep did not come easily. Every small noise made me tense, every creak of the building setting me on edge. I checked the locks on my doors and windows more times than I could count, double-checking that everything was secure. At some point, exhaustion won over fear, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, I hesitated before going outside. Part of me did not want to see the car, afraid there would be another message, but I could not avoid it forever. Steeling myself, I stepped outside and walked toward the vehicle. My breath caught as I reached it. A new message had been added. "Still see you." This time the words were scratched into the rear passenger door, just as deep as before. My stomach twisted into knots as I scanned the area. Someone had come back. They had done this while I was asleep, just a few feet away from where I rested. Unaware, the thought made my skin crawl. I did not hesitate this time. I called the authorities, explaining everything that had happened. They arrived within the hour, taking pictures and asking me questions. Had I noticed anyone suspicious? Did I have any conflicts with anyone? Was there anyone who might want to scare me? I had no answers. I had no enemies, no ongoing disputes. They promised to patrol the area more frequently and suggested installing security cameras. It was good advice, but it did not ease my fear. Cameras would only show me what had already happened, not stop it from happening again. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every sound, my mind racing with possibilities. The next few days were quiet. I kept my routine, but with heightened awareness. I watched the streets more closely, avoided staying out too late, and always checked around before leaving my apartment. I did not receive any more messages, but the unease remained. One evening, as I approached my car after work, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A small handprint-shaped smudge on the back window. It was faint, but unmistakable. I had not touched that part of the car. Someone had been there. I installed security cameras that night. The next morning I checked the footage, my heart pounding as I scanned through the hours. Then I saw it. At around 3 in the morning, a figure appeared near my car. The grainy image showed a person dressed in dark clothing, their face obscured by a hood. They stood beside the vehicle for several minutes, running their hand over the surface as if inspecting it. Then, they leaned in, pressing their palm against the window. Finally, they stepped back and walked away, disappearing into the night. I could not tell who they were, but one thing was clear. This was not random. They were watching. I reported the footage immediately, and this time the authorities took it seriously. They increased patrols and assured me they were investigating. I took extra precautions, parking in a different spot, changing my routes, staying more aware. Days passed without further incidents. Then, one evening, a knock came at my door. My heart leaped into my throat as I peered through the peephole. It was an officer. They had identified someone from the footage. A man with a record of stalking and harassment, known for fixating on random individuals. They had found him in the area, carrying a knife. He was taken into custody, and I finally felt the weight lift from my chest. The nightmare was over. Though I knew I had been lucky, the experience left a lasting mark. I never took security for granted again, never dismissed a strange occurrence as just a coincidence. I had been seen, but in the end, I made sure that I was the one watching. Story 5. It was early in the morning when I stepped outside, stretching as I took in the crisp air. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the yard. My eyes wandered over the lawn, taking in the familiar sight of the neatly trimmed grass and scattered leaves. Then, something out of place caught my attention. My power tools were sitting there, lined up in the middle of the lawn, as if someone had carefully placed them there. I stared at them for a moment, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. I had not used those tools in months. In fact, they had been packed away in the garage, stored on a high shelf where they had remained untouched. I felt a chill creep down my spine as I took a hesitant step forward. The tools were clean, free of dirt or rust, as if they had just been taken out of storage. There was no sign of tampering, no footprints in the damp grass, nothing to indicate how they had gotten there. I glanced around the yard, my eyes scanning for any movement. The street was quiet, my neighbor's house is still dark. There was no one in sight, no sign of anyone lurking nearby. My heart pounded as I bent down and picked up one of the tools, turning it over in my hands. It was exactly as I had left it, no scratches or damage, nothing out of the ordinary except for its sudden and unexplained appearance on my lawn. I quickly gathered the tools and brought them inside, locking the door behind me. I checked the garage, expecting to find the shelf disturbed, but everything was in place. There were no gaps, no signs that anything had been removed or put back. It was as if the tools had simply materialized outside on their own. The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. I spent the rest of the morning trying to convince myself that I had simply forgotten something. Maybe I had taken the tools out and left them outside without realizing it. Maybe someone had borrowed them and returned them without telling me. But deep down I knew neither of those explanations made sense. I was the only one with access to the garage, and I had no memory of touching those tools since the last time I had used them. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that something was off. The idea that someone had been in my garage, taken my tools, and then carefully placed them on the lawn without making a sound made my skin crawl. I listened to the house settle around me, every creak and groan of the wood making me tense. Sleep did not come easily. The next morning I checked the yard again, half expecting to find something else out of place. Everything seemed normal, but the sense of unease remained. I decided to install a security camera facing the backyard and another one inside the garage. If someone was coming onto my property, I wanted to catch them in the act. Days passed without incident. I checked the cameras every morning, but nothing unusual appeared. The tools remained in their place, and there were no further signs of intrusion. Just as I began to relax, telling myself it had been a one-time event, something else happened. One evening as I locked up for the night, I noticed something strange near the back door. A single screwdriver, the same brand as the ones I owned, was resting on the doorstep. My stomach twisted as I bent down to pick it up. It was not mine. I knew every tool I owned, and this one did not belong to me. I checked the garage immediately, my hands shaking as I turned on the light. My tools were all accounted for, neatly stored on the shelves. Nothing was missing. Nothing had been moved. Yet someone had left a tool behind, just like they had placed the others outside days before. I checked the security footage, fast-forwarding through hours of recordings, but there was nothing. No one had appeared on the screen, no movement, no sign of an intruder. It was as if the screwdriver had placed itself there. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I did not sleep that night. Every sound made me jump, every shadow seemed to move. I kept the lights on, my nerves stretched thin. By morning I was exhausted, but I forced myself to go about my day as usual. The screwdriver remained on my desk, a constant reminder that someone had been near my home. I decided to take extra precautions. I reinforced the locks on my doors and windows and set up additional motion sensors. If someone was coming onto my property, I wanted to be ready. Another week passed without incident. I told myself it was over, that whoever had done this had moved on. One evening, as I stepped into the garage, I noticed something different. The air felt heavy, as if the room itself was holding its breath. My eyes darted around, scanning every corner, every shelf. Then I saw it. A single wrench was sitting in the middle of the workbench. I had not left it there. I knew that for certain. I swallowed hard and stepped closer, my pulse quickening. The wrench was covered in a fine layer of dust, as if it had not been touched in years. But I knew better. Someone had placed it there, just like the tools on the lawn, just like the screwdriver on my doorstep. I picked it up slowly, turning it over in my hands. My reflection stared back at me from the polished metal. I exhaled sharply and put the wrench down. I could not explain it, but I was done being afraid. If someone wanted to play games, I would not let them win. I locked the garage, double-checked the security system, and went inside. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The following morning, I checked the cameras again. Nothing had changed. No new disturbances, no more misplaced tools. Whatever had been happening had stopped. Days turned into weeks and life slowly returned to normal. The tools stayed where they belonged, and the security footage remained clear. I never found out who had placed those tools outside or why. Maybe it had been a prank, or maybe it had been something else entirely. In the end, I decided not to dwell on it. Life moved on, and so did I. The unease faded, replaced by a sense of quiet acceptance. The mystery remained unsolved, but it no longer haunted me. I'd taken control of my home, my space, and that was enough. The tools, the screwdriver, the wrench, they became nothing more than a strange memory. Whatever had happened, it was over now, and that was all that mattered. Story 6. I blinked against the dim morning light filtering through the curtains, stretching as I tried to shake off the last remnants of sleep. My body felt heavy, my mind sluggish, but something felt off. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes, and as my vision cleared, a cold wave of unease washed over me. Every single closet door in my room was wide open. I stared for a long moment, my breath catching in my throat. The doors had been closed when I went to bed. I was sure of it. I had a habit of shutting them tightly before sleeping, always making sure they clicked into place. Now they stood open, revealing rows of clothes, empty shelves, and the dark spaces at the back where the light did not reach. I swallowed hard and forced myself to move, my heart hammering in my chest. The air in the room felt colder than it should have. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe a draft, though none of the windows were open. Maybe I had sleepwalked, though I never had before. My fingers trembled as I reached for the closest door and pushed it shut. the hinges creaking loudly in the silence. I moved to the next, then the next, each door closing with a soft thud. My skin prickled with unease as I worked, a deep sense of being watched settling in my stomach. I glanced over my shoulder more than once, expecting to see something lurking in the shadows, but there was nothing. Just my room, just the quiet, just my own uneven breathing. I tried to go about my morning as usual, but the uneasiness lingered. Every time I turned away from the closets, I felt a pull to look back, as if something might change the moment I was not watching. I told myself I was being paranoid, but it was impossible to shake the feeling that something had been in my room while I slept. That night, I double-checked every door before climbing into bed. I made sure they were shut tightly, even pressing against them to test if they would open on their own. Satisfied, I crawled under the covers, pulling them up to my chin. Sleep came slowly, my mind refusing to quiet, but eventually, exhaustion won. When I woke, my stomach dropped. The closet doors were wide open again. A sharp chill ran down my spine, and I bolted upright. My pulse pounded in my ears as I scanned the room, half expecting something to be standing in the dark corners. My breathing was uneven, my chest tight with fear. This was not normal. This was not my imagination. I forced myself out of bed, my hands trembling as I shut the doors once more. I needed to find a rational explanation. Maybe I was moving in my sleep, even though I had never done anything like that before. Maybe the latches were weak, though they had never opened on their own before. I refused to let my mind go to darker possibilities. I set up a camera that night, positioning it so it faced the closets directly. If something was happening, I would see it. I needed proof. I needed to know. Morning came and my worst fear was confirmed. The closet doors were open. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone and played the footage. The first few hours showed nothing but stillness, the faint glow of the nightlight casting shadows across the room. Then, at some point past 3 a.m., the doors began to open one by one. No force was visible. No movement, no presence. Just doors creaking open as if on their own. I sat frozen, my phone gripped tightly in my hands. There was no logical explanation for this. The air in the room felt heavier, the walls seeming to press in around me. I had never believed in things beyond reason, but this I could not ignore. I refused to sleep in the room that night. Instead, I stayed in the living room, my heart pounding with every small sound the house made. The following morning, I checked the room, holding my breath as I pushed open the door. The closet stood wide open once again. I had to leave. I could not stay in that house, not knowing something was in there with me. I packed quickly, not bothering to organize. Every noise sent a spike of fear through me, but I forced myself to keep moving. Within an hour, I was gone. Days passed before I felt calm again. I did not look back. I did not return for anything I left behind. Whatever had been in that house could stay there. I wanted no part of it. Story 7. I was sitting in my living room when I noticed movement outside the window. At first, I thought it was just a shadow passing by, but when I turned my head, I saw someone standing there. The figure was partially obscured by the reflection of the room's light, but I could make out the shape of a person. They raised a hand and waved at me, slow and deliberate. My stomach tightened as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I stood up cautiously, my heart pounding as I took a step toward the window. The stranger did not move, their hands still slightly raised as if they were waiting for me to respond. Something about their posture unsettled me. It was not a friendly wave, nor did it seem casual. It felt intentional, as if they were trying to get my attention for a reason I could not understand. My fingers hovered near the curtain as I hesitated, unsure if I should pull it back for a better look. As soon as I reached the window, the figure was gone. I blinked and scanned the area outside, my breath catching in my throat. The street was empty. No footsteps, no signs that anyone had been standing there just moments ago. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I quickly glanced at the door, making sure it was locked, then turned back to the window, straining to see if someone was still there. I opened the curtain slightly, peering outside with cautious movements. The streetlights cast a dim glow over the sidewalk, and everything looked normal. No cars were parked nearby, no figures lurking in the shadows. I tried to convince myself that it had been my imagination, a trick of the light, or a passerby who had simply moved on before I reached the window. But the feeling in my chest told me otherwise. Someone had been there, and they had waved at me for a reason. I sat back down, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. I picked up my phone and checked the time. It was late, but not so late that seeing someone outside would be impossible. Maybe it was a neighbor, though none of them had ever stopped by before. Maybe it was just someone who got the wrong house and left when they realized their mistake. I wanted to believe that, but something about the way they disappeared so quickly made my skin crawl. The next day, I could not stop thinking about what had happened. I checked the window again in the morning, scanning the ground for any footprints or signs that someone had been standing there. The pavement was dry and undisturbed. No footprints, no markings, nothing to prove that anyone had been there at all. It was as if I had imagined the entire thing, but I knew what I saw. That wave had been real. That night, I kept the curtains closed, but I found myself glancing toward the window every few minutes. The memory of that silent wave replayed in my mind, making it impossible to focus on anything else. I told myself that if it happened again, I would be ready. If someone waved at me through the window, I would not hesitate. I would go outside and confront them, demand to know why they were standing there. Hours passed, and nothing happened. Just when I started to feel foolish for obsessing over it, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. My breath caught as I turned my head toward the window. The curtain was closed, but I could see the faintest shift of a shadow on the other side. My entire body tensed as I stood up, my mind racing. Someone was there again. I moved slowly toward the window, this time refusing to hesitate. I grabbed the curtain and yanked it open in one swift motion, my heart hammering in my chest. The space outside was empty. No one was standing there. I pressed my palm against the glass, my reflection staring back at me in the dim light. I let out a shaky breath, trying to make sense of what was happening. I turned away from the window, telling myself it was nothing, but the uneasy feeling did not fade. I checked the locks on the doors twice before heading to bed. Sleep did not come easily, and every small noise in the house made me jolt awake. The image of the stranger waving at me lingered in my mind, refusing to be forgotten. The following evening, I decided to set up my phone near the window to record any movement. If someone showed up again, I wanted proof. I placed it at an angle where it could capture the outside view without being too obvious. Then I went about my night as usual, keeping my routine the same, pretending not to be on edge. Hours later, when I checked the footage, my stomach turned. At one point, the video clearly showed a figure standing outside the window. They appeared suddenly, as if they had stepped out of nowhere. The quality was grainy, but I could make out the shape of a person. They lifted their hand and waved, just like before. I could not see their face, only a dark silhouette against the streetlight. Then, in an instant, they vanished. One frame they were there, and the next they were gone. I stared at the screen, my hands gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. I rewound the footage, watching it again and again, but the result was always the same. The stranger appeared, waved, and then disappeared without a trace. I had proof now. Someone had been outside my window, watching me, acknowledging me, and then slipping away as if they had never been there at all. I spent the next day debating whether to show the video to someone, maybe even report it. But what would I say? That a stranger waved at me and vanished. That I had caught it on video, but there was no clear face, no identifiable features. It felt pointless, like no one would take it seriously. So instead I took extra precautions. I reinforced the locks, installed a security camera outside, and made sure every window was secured. Days passed, and the stranger never returned. The camera outside captured nothing unusual. Life slowly returned to normal, but I never fully relaxed. The memory of that silent wave stayed with me, a lingering question that would never be answered. Who had they been, and why had they acknowledged me in such an unsettling way? I knew I would never find out. I eventually moved away from that house, but even in a different place, with different windows, I still caught myself glancing outside at night. I never saw the stranger again, but I knew deep down that they had seen me, and that thought was enough to keep me watching, just in case. Story 8. The house was quiet when I returned home that evening. I set my keys on the table and walked down the hall toward my office, already thinking about the emails I needed to check. As I pushed open the door, I immediately froze. My office chair was spinning slowly in place, as if someone had just been sitting in it. The sight of it sent a chill down my spine. I stood there for a moment, watching the chair rotate until it eventually came to a stop. My first thought was that maybe I had bumped into the desk, but I knew that was not the case. I had not touched anything. The air in the room felt still, but there was an unsettling energy lingering as if someone had just been there. I stepped inside cautiously, scanning the room for anything unusual. Everything else appeared to be exactly how I had left it. My desk was neat, the papers stacked in the same order as before, and my laptop was closed. There was no sign of forced entry, no open windows, and nothing else out of place. But that chair had been moving when I walked in. I reached out and placed my hand on the backrest, feeling the cool material beneath my fingers. The thought of someone sitting in it while I was gone made my skin crawl. I checked the entire house, searching for any sign that someone else had been inside. The front door was locked, the windows were secure, and nothing else seemed out of place. There were no footprints on the floors, no signs of forced entry, and no reason why the chair should have been moving. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just a draft, or maybe I had not noticed it before leaving. The next morning, I woke up with the previous night still weighing on my mind. I hesitated before opening the office door, half expecting to see the chair moving again. It was still this time, exactly where I had left it. I let out a breath, relieved but still uneasy. I decided to set up a small camera in the office. If anything strange happened again, I would have proof. That night, I made sure the chair was still before heading to bed. The house was silent, the only sound coming from the occasional creak of the walls settling. I struggled to sleep, my thoughts looping back to the image of that chair slowly spinning. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off. In the morning, I checked the camera footage with a knot in my stomach. The video showed nothing unusual at first, just the empty office, dimly lit by the glow from my desk lamp. Hours passed with no movement. Then, sometime after midnight, the chair shifted. It started spinning slowly, just as I had seen the night before. There was no one in the room. No windows had opened, no air vents had turned on, and yet the chair moved as if someone had pushed it. I rewound the footage and watched it again, trying to find any logical explanation. There was nothing that could have caused it. The chair had been completely still, then had suddenly started to rotate on its own. My hands felt clammy as I paused the video, my pulse quickening. I checked the chair again, inspecting every part of it for loose mechanisms or anything that could explain the movement. It was solid, with no signs of malfunction. I even tried moving it myself, spinning it and stepping back to see how long it would rotate. It slowed and stopped within seconds, not nearly as long as it had moved in the video. I decided to take extra precautions. I placed a small object, a pen, on the seat of the chair before leaving for work. If anything moved again, the pen would not be in the same place. When I returned that evening, the first thing I did was check the office. My stomach dropped. The chair had moved slightly, and the pen was on the floor. I grabbed the camera and reviewed the footage, my breath catching in my throat. Just like before, the chair had started moving in the middle of the night, spinning slowly before stopping. The pen had slid off as the seat tilted ever so slightly. I could not explain it. There was no visible force, no sign of tampering, nothing that made any sense. The next few nights followed the same pattern. Every time I checked the footage, I saw the chair move on its own. Some nights it spun just slightly, barely noticeable, while other times it turned in a full rotation before coming to a stop. I kept searching for an explanation, but there was nothing. After a week of this, I finally decided to get rid of the chair. I could not stand the sight of it anymore. I carried it out to the curb, leaving it with the trash. That night, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in days, I was able to sleep peacefully. When I woke up, I hesitated before stepping into the office. My desk was exactly as I had left it. The chair was gone, replaced with a new one I had picked up the day before. I sat down carefully, testing the feel of it beneath me. Nothing moved. And the next few nights passed without incident. No spinning chair, no strange movements, nothing. It was as if whatever had been happening had left along with the old chair. I never found out why it had moved or what had caused it, but I was grateful that it had stopped. To this day, I still think about that chair. I wonder if someone else took it, if it ended up in another home, and if it ever moved again. I will never know, but I do not need to. The silence in my office is enough. Story 9. When I woke up that morning, everything felt normal. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, and the house was quiet. I stretched, got out of bed, and walked toward the bathroom. As I reached for my toothbrush, my hand hesitated. The bristles were wet. I frowned, trying to recall if I had brushed my teeth earlier, but I knew I had not. My morning routine had barely started. I picked up the toothbrush, examining it closely. Water dripped slightly from the bristles, as if it had just been used. My heartbeat quickened. I lived alone, and no one else had access to my home. I checked the sink, but it was dry. If someone had used my toothbrush, they had been careful not to leave any other trace. I stepped back, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe I had forgotten using it, but that did not make sense. The memory of waking up was clear, and I knew I had not even turned on the faucet yet. I left the bathroom and checked the rest of the house. The front door was locked, the windows secured. Everything was exactly as I had left it the night before. I walked back into the bathroom, staring at the toothbrush as if it held answers. Someone had used it. Someone had been in my home. The thought sent a chill through me. I stood there for a moment, forcing myself to think logically. I checked every corner of the house again, searching for any sign of disturbance. There was nothing. My belongings were untouched, my furniture was in place. If someone had broken in, They had done so without leaving any evidence. I grabbed the toothbrush and threw it into the trash. There was no way I was using it again. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. Maybe there was an explanation I had not thought of yet. Maybe it was something simple, something harmless. But the feeling lingered. All day I found myself glancing over my shoulder, listening for sounds that were not there. That night I double-checked the locks, making sure every window was secured. I placed a chair against the front door, not because I thought it would help, but because it gave me a small sense of control. The next morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I walked into the bathroom, hesitant to look at the sink. My breath caught in my throat. A new toothbrush, identical to the one I had thrown away, sat in the same spot. The bristles were wet. I backed out of the bathroom, my heart pounding. I knew I had not bought another toothbrush. I knew I had not placed it there. Someone had been in my home again. I checked every door and window, but everything was locked just as I had left it. Nothing was missing, nothing was out of place. The only thing different was the toothbrush. I felt my hands shaking as I picked up my phone, unsure of what to do. What would I even say? That someone had replaced my toothbrush overnight? I tried to calm myself, telling myself there had to be a rational explanation. But deep down I knew there was not. I had to do something. That evening I installed a small camera in the hallway, aimed directly at the bathroom door. If someone was entering my home, I needed proof. I barely slept that night, my ears straining for any sound. The house remained silent, but the feeling of being watched stayed with me. In the morning I rushed to check the footage. My hands trembled as I opened the video file. The footage showed the hallway, dimly lit by the bathroom light. Hours passed with nothing happening. Then, at some point during the night, the bathroom door slowly creaked open. My breath caught in my throat. No one was visible. No shadow, no figure, just the door opening on its own. I replayed the footage, searching for anything I might have missed. The door had remained closed all night until that moment. Then, after a few minutes, it shut again. The toothbrush had been replaced during that time, yet no one appeared on the camera. I felt my stomach turn. I grabbed my keys and left the house, sitting in my car while I tried to make sense of what I had seen. There was no logical explanation. I had locked my doors, I had been alone, but something had entered my home. I drove to the store and bought new locks, changing every single one before the sun set. I set up more cameras, checking them constantly. Night after night, nothing happened. The footage showed only silence and stillness. Days passed, then weeks. No new toothbrushes appeared. No doors opened on their own. The fear started to fade, replaced by cautious relief. Whatever had happened, it seemed to be over. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I glanced at the bathroom sink one last time. My toothbrush was dry. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. I turned off the light and walked out, feeling a sense of finality. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. When morning came, I walked into the bathroom without hesitation. The toothbrush was still there, untouched. I smiled to myself, finally ready to put the entire experience behind me. Whatever had happened, it no longer mattered. I had taken control of my home again, and this time I knew I was the only one inside. Story 10. The cassette tape had not been there the night before. I was sure of it. My desk was always neatly arranged, and I had no reason to own an old cassette tape. Yet there it was, sitting in the center of my workspace with the words "Listen Now" written in bold, uneven letters across the label. I picked it up carefully, turning it over in my hands. It was an ordinary cassette, the kind that had not been widely used in years. I had no idea where it had come from or how it had ended up in my house. The doors had been locked, the windows secured. There was no sign of forced entry. Despite the unease creeping through me, curiosity won. I searched through some old storage boxes until I found an old cassette player that had belonged to a family member. After checking that it still worked, I inserted the tape and pressed play. The cassette whirred, and for several seconds there was nothing but static. Then a voice, low, distorted, and unrecognizable. "Are you listening?" it asked. I felt my breath catch as the voice continued. "Good. Pay attention. This is important." The next sound was something I could not quite place. A faint tapping, like fingers drumming on a table. Then, a deep breath. I leaned closer, straining to make sense of the audio. "You do not remember me," the voice said, "but I remember you." A chill ran through me. The tone was calm, deliberate. Not threatening, but not reassuring either. I glanced around the room as if expecting someone to be there, watching. The tape continued. "I have been waiting, watching. You will understand soon." The words sent a shiver down my spine. My hands felt clammy as I hesitated to press stop. My heart pounded in my chest. Who had recorded this? And why was it left for me? The next sound made me freeze. It was the unmistakable creak of a door opening. My door. My head snapped toward the entrance to my room, but it was closed, just as it had been before. Yet the audio continued, playing what sounded like footsteps moving across a floor. I slammed the stop button. Silence filled the room. My mind raced. Was this a prank? Had someone recorded sounds from inside my home? I checked every door and window again, but nothing was out of place. The locks were secure. There was no sign of an intruder. I pressed play again, my fingers trembling. The recording picked up where it left off. The footsteps stopped, and the voice returned. "You are wondering if you are alone," it said. "You are not." A pause, then a faint, almost imperceptible chuckle. "Check the closet." I stared at my closet door. It was slightly ajar, just as I had left it that morning. But now I was not so sure. My pulse pounded as I rose from my chair, cassette player still in hand. I moved slowly, each step deliberate. Reaching out, I gripped the handle and yanked the door open. Nothing. Just clothes, shoes, and storage boxes. I exhaled shakily, feeling foolish for letting my imagination get the best of me. But when I looked down, I noticed something I had not seen before. A small envelope resting on top of my shoes. I picked it up and opened it with unsteady hands. Inside was a single photograph. A blurry image of me sitting at my desk listening to the tape. My blood turned to ice. I spun around, scanning the room. Someone had been here. Someone had taken this photo. The cassette player was still running, the voice speaking one final sentence. "See you soon." The tape clicked off. I spent the next few hours checking every inch of my home, searching for hidden cameras, signs of forced entry, anything that could explain what had happened. But I found nothing. The police were called, but without any real evidence of a crime, they could not do much. Days passed, then weeks. I never found out who left the tape or how they had managed to take that photo. I changed my locks, installed cameras, and made sure never to be alone in my house for long. The tape remained locked away in a drawer, untouched. I never listened to it again. Story 11. 11. I stepped outside, still groggy from sleep, and nearly missed it at first. A small yellow sticky note clung to my front door, slightly curled at the edges as if it had been there for a while. The message, written in black ink, was short but chilling. "Good luck tonight." My stomach twisted as I stared at the words, my mind racing with questions. I had no idea who left it or what it meant, but something about it sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced around the street, scanning for anything unusual, but everything looked the same as it always did. A few cars lined the curb, neighbors' houses stood quiet, and the early morning air felt still. There was no one around, no sign of movement, nothing to explain the note. I peeled it off the door, my fingers hesitating as I turned it over. The back was blank. No name, no clue, nothing. I stepped back inside and locked the door, my pulse slightly faster than normal. Maybe it was a prank, just someone messing around. But why my house? And why that message? I set the note on the kitchen counter and made coffee, trying to push the unease away. By the time I finished my first cup, I had almost convinced myself it was nothing. The day passed as usual, but the note stayed on my mind. Every time I glanced at it, the words seemed heavier, as if they carried some unseen weight. Good luck tonight. The more I thought about it, the less it felt like a joke. By evening, I could not shake the feeling that something was coming, something I was not prepared for. As night fell, I locked all the doors and windows, double-checking each one. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of the floorboards. I left a lamp on in the living room, not wanting to sit in complete darkness. I told myself I was overreacting, but my hands still felt unsteady as I picked up my phone. Hours passed and nothing happened. I watched the clock tick past midnight, my body tense with anticipation. Every sound made me flinch, but the night remained quiet. By 2 a.m, exhaustion began to take over. My eyes felt heavy, my limbs sluggish. I decided to lie down on the couch instead of going to my bedroom, just in case. I must have dozed off because I woke up suddenly to a noise outside. A soft rustling, barely audible but distinct enough to jolt me fully awake. I sat up, my breath caught in my throat, listening intently. The sound came again, just outside my front door. My mind raced back to the note, to the warning it carried. I stood slowly, careful not to make a sound. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. I hesitated, unsure if I should check. The peephole was too dark to see anything. My fingers hovered over the lock before I stepped back. Whatever was out there, I did not want to meet it. Minutes passed, then silence returned. No more rustling, no more sounds. My heart pounded as I waited, but nothing happened. After what felt like an eternity, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I stayed awake until the first light of morning seeped through the windows. When I finally worked up the courage to open the door, there was nothing there. No footprints, no sign that anyone had been there at all. Just the cold morning air and an empty street. The note was still on the counter, its message staring back at me. I did not know who left it or what it meant, but I knew one thing for sure. I had been lucky last night. Story 12. It was late in the evening when I sat down on the couch, scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly. The day had been long, filled with the usual routine, and I was ready to wind down. I opened my settings, checking notifications when I saw a prompt from my location history. It was nothing unusual. My phone occasionally logged my whereabouts, marking familiar places like my home, work, and the grocery store. But one entry caught my eye. It was a location I had never been to. The name of the place meant nothing to me. It was over an hour away, deep in a part of the city I had no reason to visit. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake. Maybe the GPS had glitched or marked a spot incorrectly. But when I tapped on the entry, the details made my stomach tighten. The timestamp showed that my phone had been there in the middle of the night. I had been asleep, at home in my bed. I had not left the house. There was no reason for my phone to have recorded movement. I checked my call log, my messages, my photos, everything was normal. There were no late-night texts or outgoing calls, nothing that suggested I had been anywhere but here. I searched for the location online, hoping to recognize something about it. It was an abandoned building on the outskirts of town, a structure left untouched for years. The search results showed grainy images of a crumbling warehouse, the windows shattered, the roof sagging from neglect. The articles that came up mentioned nothing unusual, just that it had once been a storage facility before it was shut down. The unease creeping over me refused to fade. If I had not been there, then how had my phone registered it? I checked my door's security camera, scrolling through the footage from the night before. Every clip showed the same thing: my front door still and quiet. No movement, no sign of anyone coming or going. I tried to put it out of my mind, convincing myself it was just a technical glitch. But when I checked my phone again the next day, the location was still there. And this time there was another entry. A new place. Another unknown location. It was not far from the first. A few miles down the same road. The timestamp was almost the same as the night before, just after midnight. My hands felt clammy as I tried to piece together an explanation. Was my phone being tracked? Was someone else using my information? I reset my location history, cleared my data, and turned off tracking entirely. Whatever was causing the issue, I wanted no part of it. For the next few nights, I kept my phone beside me, checking it every morning with growing dread. Then, one evening, I noticed something new. My phone's battery was draining faster than usual. I had charged it fully before bed, yet when I woke up, it was nearly dead. I opened my settings, checking for apps running in the background. There was nothing unusual except for a recent activity log showing that my location services had been used overnight. I had turned them off. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. I had disabled tracking completely. There was no reason for it to be on. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the settings, searching for any sign of a change. That was when I saw it: an unfamiliar device had accessed my phone during the night. A connection I had never approved. I turned off my Wi-Fi, reset my passwords, and even removed my SIM card. Whatever was happening, I needed to stop it. The fear gnawed at the back of my mind. Had someone been near my house? Had they taken my phone and returned it without me knowing? The next night, I stayed awake, watching. I placed my phone on the nightstand, keeping an eye on it as the hours passed. The house was silent, the dim glow of the screen the only source of light in the room. Just after midnight, my phone lit up on its own. The screen displayed my location history, showing a new entry. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I reached for it, my hands shaking as I tapped on the address. It was closer this time, barely 10 minutes from my home. A soft creak echoed from outside. My heart pounded as I strained to listen. The house settled in the stillness, every sound amplified by my racing thoughts. I moved to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see the street below. Nothing, no movement, no sign of anyone. I checked my security camera footage again. This time there was something. A figure standing at the edge of my driveway. They did not move. They did not step closer. They just stood there facing my house. I grabbed my phone and dialed for help. As I waited, my eyes stayed locked on the screen, watching. The figure remained there for another moment before slowly turning away and disappearing into the darkness. When the authorities arrived, they searched the area but found nothing. No footprints, no sign of forced entry. My phone was still in my room, untouched. There was no explanation for the entries in my location history, no proof of where they had come from. But I knew what I had seen. I knew someone had been watching. I got rid of my phone the next day. A fresh start. A clean slate. I reset everything, changed every password, and made sure no device was connected to mine. For a while, nothing happened. No strange locations, no odd entries in my history. The unease slowly faded, replaced by the comfort of routine. Then one evening I received a message on my new phone. A single location pin marked just a few blocks away. No name, no sender, just an address. And beneath it, a single word. Soon. Story 13. The clatter of dishes and the hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen as I stood at the counter, lost in thought. The day had been uneventful, and I was grateful for the quiet. The house was still, the kind of stillness that felt comforting. I reached for a glass of water when a sound cut through the silence. A low, mechanical groan echoed from the direction of the garage shed. I froze, the glass hovering just above the counter. The sound was unmistakable, the deep rumbling of the garage door rising. My pulse quickened as I placed the glass down, straining to listen. The noise continued, the slow metallic creak of the door moving along its track. My first thought was a power surge or a malfunction, but the timing was odd. I had not touched the remote, and no one else was home. I hesitated for a moment before making my way to the door leading to the garage. My hand hovered over the doorknob, my heart pounding harder than I wanted to admit. Taking a breath, I twisted it open and peered inside. The garage was dimly lit by the weak glow of the overhead bulb, and sure enough, the door was halfway open. A cold draft seeped in from outside. I stepped forward, cautiously scanning the space. My car sat undisturbed, tools neatly arranged on the shelves. Nothing looked out of place, but something felt wrong. I moved to the garage door opener mounted on the wall and pressed the button. The motor whirred to life, and the door began descending, groaning as it settled back into place. I stood there for a moment, waiting. There was no movement outside, no sign of anyone lurking near the driveway. I checked the remote control sitting on the workbench, making sure it had not been accidentally pressed. It was right where I had left it, untouched. I picked it up and clicked the button a few times. The door responded normally, rising and lowering without hesitation. Telling myself it was a simple glitch, I secured the door, locked the side entrance, and went back inside. Still, unease clung to me as I returned to the kitchen. I tried to push the thought away, convincing myself that if it happened again, I would call a technician. The rest of the evening passed without incident, and I almost forgot about the garage door. Almost. That night, as I settled into bed, I heard it again. The same low mechanical groan, the heavy clank of metal shifting. I bolted upright, my skin prickling. The sound was unmistakable, the garage door opening on its own again. I grabbed my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen, debating whether to call someone. But who? The police, a repair service. Neither option made sense. Forcing myself to move, I grabbed the nearest object for protection and crept toward the garage. The moment I reached the door, I hesitated. A sharp chill ran through me, an instinct screaming at me not to open it. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. The air was thick with silence, too silent. Gathering my courage, I turned the knob and slowly pushed the door open. The garage door was fully open now, exposing the dark driveway beyond. The night air was cold against my skin as I stepped inside, gripping my phone tightly. I scanned the space, my breath shallow. Nothing seemed out of place, yet the unease was suffocating. I walked to the wall panel and pressed the button again. The door hesitated for a split second before slowly descending. My nerves were frayed as I watched it shut completely. I locked it once more, double-checking every possible entrance. Then, with one final glance outside, I hurried back into the house and bolted the door behind me. I barely slept that night, my ears attuned to every creak and whisper of the house. Morning could not come fast enough. The first thing I did was call a garage door technician. He arrived later that afternoon, a friendly man who inspected the system with practiced ease. He tested the opener, the sensors, and the wiring. Everything was in working order. No signs of malfunctions, no electrical issues. I asked if a power surge could have triggered it, but he shook his head. The opener had no record of recent activity. I mentioned that it had happened twice, and he gave me a thoughtful look before suggesting a simple fix. He reset the system, changed the access codes, and told me to monitor it. If it happened again, I should call him immediately. That night I waited, tense and alert. Midnight passed, then 1, then 2 in the morning. The house remained still, no mechanical groans, no unexpected movement. Days passed, and the garage door remained shut, responding only when I pressed the button. The unease slowly faded, though I still found myself glancing at it more often than before. Whatever had happened that night, it was over now. I never did figure out what caused it. Maybe it was a glitch, maybe interference from a neighbor's remote, or maybe it was something I was better off not understanding. Either way, the door stayed closed from then on, and I was content to leave it that way. Story 14. I pulled into my driveway after a long day, expecting the usual sight of smooth concrete leading up to my garage. Instead, my eyes locked onto something that had never been there before. Dark, uneven tire marks streaked across the pavement, curving in a way that suggested a vehicle had stopped, reversed, and then pulled away. The sight made my stomach tighten. I lived alone and no one else had any reason to be on my property. I stepped out of my car slowly, my gaze scanning the driveway as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The marks were fresh, the rubber smudges still bold against the lighter concrete. I had left in the morning, and they had not been there then. That meant someone had been here while I was gone. A stranger had pulled up to my house, stayed long enough to leave a clear imprint, and then left without a trace. I walked toward the marks, kneeling to examine them more closely. The tread pattern was different from my own tires. The shape and width suggested a larger vehicle, possibly an SUV or a truck. I followed the tracks with my eyes, noting how they veered slightly before disappearing at the edge of the street. My heart pounded as I turned to look at my front door. It was locked, just as I had left it. Nothing seemed out of place, but the unease settled deep in my chest. I unlocked the door and stepped inside cautiously, flipping on the lights as I went. The house was still, exactly as I had left it. No signs of forced entry, no misplaced objects, nothing disturbed. Yet the feeling of being watched clung to me, a weight pressing down on my shoulders. I walked through each room, checking windows, closets, even under furniture, but I found nothing unusual. Still, I could not shake the thought that someone had been close. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the discovery over and over. Had it been someone lost? A delivery driver making a wrong turn? Or was it something more intentional? The thought of an unknown vehicle pulling into my driveway and lingering made my skin crawl. At some point, exhaustion overtook my worry, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep. The next morning I stepped outside and hesitated before walking toward my car. The tire marks were still there, a reminder that something had been off the night before. I decided to check my security cameras. They were simple, just two mounted outside my front door and garage, but they had captured motion in the past. I pulled up the footage on my phone, my fingers tapping impatiently as I scrolled through the timeline. Then I saw it. Ice. At 1:46 in the afternoon, a dark SUV rolled into my driveway. The vehicle idled for several seconds before inching forward. It stopped near my front porch, sitting there as if the driver was waiting for something. My stomach tightened as I watched. The windows were tinted, obscuring whoever was inside. A minute passed, then another. Finally, the vehicle reversed slowly, pausing before backing out onto the street. I rewound the footage, watching again, searching for details. There was no visible license plate from the angle of my cameras. No one got out. No delivery was made. The car had simply arrived, waited, and left. My pulse pounded in my ears. Why would someone pull into my driveway, sit there, and then leave without doing anything? I saved the footage, my hands trembling slightly. I needed to report this, at least to have it on record. I dialed the authorities and explained the situation, describing the vehicle, the tire marks, and the footage. They agreed to send someone to take a report, though they warned me there was little they could do without more details. The call ended with them advising me to stay vigilant. That evening, I parked on the street instead of in my driveway, wanting a better view of my surroundings. I kept my lights off and sat near the window, watching, waiting to see if the vehicle would return. Hours passed, and nothing happened. I finally allowed myself to sleep, though it was restless. The next few days were quiet. The tire marks faded slightly with time and no new ones appeared. I started to believe it had been a one-time event, a mistake or coincidence. But on the fourth night, I woke to the sound of an engine idling outside my window. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. The street was mostly dark, the nearest street lamp casting only a faint glow. I crept toward the window, careful not to be seen. There it was. The same dark SUV, parked just beyond my driveway, its headlights off. It was barely visible, blending into the night. I watched, breath held, as the car sat motionless. My phone was in my hand before I even realized it, dialing the authorities again. My voice was low, urgent, as I explained that the vehicle had returned. They assured me someone would be dispatched. Minutes passed. The SUV did not move. Then, just as I saw a pair of headlights approaching from the other end of the street, the SUV's engine revved softly. It pulled away smoothly, disappearing down the road before the patrol car even arrived. The officer took my statement, but admitted that without a plate number or clearer details, there was little they could do. They promised to increase patrols in my area, but that did not erase the fear that had settled deep inside me. Whoever had been in that vehicle had come back. They had waited, watching from a distance, and now they knew that I had seen them. That realization kept me on edge. I changed my routine, varying the times I left and returned home. I installed additional cameras, making sure every angle was covered. I even had motion sensor lights placed around my driveway and front yard. Days passed, then weeks. The SUV never returned. I never found out who had been in that car or what they had wanted. Maybe it had been nothing. Maybe it had been something far worse. But the experience changed the way I saw my own home. I was careful, always aware, never assuming safety. The tire marks eventually faded completely, but the unease they had left behind never did. Story 15. It was early in the morning when I stepped outside, rubbing my arms against the chill in the air. The street was quiet, the sky still tinged with the last traces of night. I walked toward my car, already thinking about the errands I needed to run. As I reached for the door handle, my eyes caught something unusual on the roof. A single glove sat there, perfectly placed as if someone had deliberately left it. I frowned and glanced around, searching for any sign of movement. The neighborhood was still, my neighbors' houses dark and silent. I had not been outside since the night before, and I was certain the glove had not been there then. I hesitated before picking it up. The material was thick, like a winter glove, but it was not mine. I did not own anything like it. I turned it over in my hands, inspecting it closely. There was no sign of wear, no stains or tears, just a plain black glove. My stomach twisted as I looked around again. Someone had been near my car, close enough to place the glove on the roof without making a sound. The thought unsettled me. I set it aside and got into the car, trying to shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it had blown onto the roof from somewhere, though that seemed unlikely. There had been no wind the night before, and the glove had been too neatly placed to have landed by accident. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone watching me from the sidewalk. The day passed uneventfully, but I could not get the glove out of my mind. When I returned home, I checked the footage from the security camera facing the driveway. My pulse quickened as I skimmed through the recording. The hours passed with nothing unusual until just after midnight. A shadow moved near the edge of the screen. It was too dark to make out any features, but someone had definitely been there. The figure lingered for a moment before stepping closer. My breath caught in my throat as I watched the person approach my car. They reached out, placed something on the roof, then turned and disappeared into the darkness. I rewound the footage, pausing at the moment the figure placed the glove on my car. The person was careful, almost deliberate in their movements. I could not see a face, just a dark silhouette against the faint glow of the streetlights. My skin prickled as I realized they had not been in a hurry. They had taken their time. I checked the rest of the footage, but there was nothing else. No one returned, no other disturbances. The rest of the night passed in silence. I sat back, my mind racing with questions. Who had left the glove, and why? Was it some kind of warning, or just a strange prank? I decided to keep my doors locked and my phone nearby that night. Sleep did not come easily. Every creak of the house made me tense. Every gust of wind outside felt like a footstep. By morning I was exhausted but relieved to find nothing else out of place. For the next few days I remained on edge, checking the security footage every morning. Nothing unusual happened. The glove remained on my counter, untouched. I considered throwing it away, but something stopped me. It felt like getting rid of it would not make the situation any less unsettling. One evening, as I returned home from work, something caught my attention near the car. Another glove, identical to the first, was sitting on the hood. My stomach dropped. I scanned the area, my heart pounding. The street was empty, the houses quiet. I hurried inside and locked the door behind me. I checked the security footage immediately. Just like before, the figure appeared in the middle of the night. They moved toward my car, placed the second glove on the hood, then walked away. There was no hesitation, no rush. Whoever they were, they wanted me to find it. I decided to call the police. An officer arrived later that night, listening carefully as I explained what had happened. He examined the gloves but found nothing unusual. No markings, no hidden notes, nothing that could explain why they had been left. He advised me to stay cautious and call again if anything else happened. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made my pulse race. I kept my phone in my hand, ready to call for help at the slightest noise. But the hours passed in silence. The next morning I stepped outside, bracing myself for another glove. But there was nothing. The car was untouched, the street as empty as ever. Days turned into weeks, and no more gloves appeared. The security footage remained clear, and my unease slowly began to fade. The gloves remained on my desk, a reminder of the strange events that had unsettled me so deeply. I never found out who had left them or why. Maybe it had been a prank, or maybe it had been something more. But in the end, nothing else happened. I kept the security cameras running, just in case. The gloves stayed where they were, untouched, and life gradually returned to normal. Whatever had happened, it was over now, and that was enough. Story 16. I opened the freezer to grab some ice for my drink, expecting to see the usual tray filled with small, rounded cubes. Instead, my breath caught in my throat. The ice cubes were not their normal shape. They were keys. Each one was frozen solid, perfectly molded with grooves, ridges, and distinct cuts as if they had been cast from real keys. They filled every tray, stacked in neat rows. My fingers hovered over them, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. I had not made these. I had not put them there. I took a hesitant step back, my heart hammering in my chest. Who had done this? How had they gotten into my home? My freezer was closed all night. No one else had been here. The more I stared at them, the more unsettling they became. Keys meant locks. Locks meant doors. Doors meant something or someone trying to get in. I reached for one of the ice keys, my fingers barely brushing the surface before I yanked my hand back. The cold was expected, but there was something else. Something wrong. A sensation that made my skin crawl, like the ice was not just frozen water, but something more. I grabbed a knife from the counter and tapped one of the cubes, watching it chip away. The inside was clear, normal, nothing unusual beyond its shape. I needed to understand how this happened. I checked the ice trays, searching for an explanation. The plastic was the same as always, no hidden molds, no signs of tampering. It made no sense. I emptied the trays into the sink, watching the frozen keys clatter against the metal and begin to melt. The water pooled around the drain, leaving no trace of their strange form. I filled the trays again with fresh water, setting them back inside the freezer. I needed to see if this would happen again. If it did, then I had a much bigger problem. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the house made me tense. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the walls settling things I had heard 1,000 times before now sent spikes of unease through me. I forced myself to stay in bed, knowing that whatever had happened, I would have my answer in the morning. The moment the sun peeked through the blinds, I rushed to the freezer. My stomach dropped. The ice trays were full again, and every single cube was shaped like a key. A cold sweat broke out on my skin as I grabbed the trays and dumped them into the sink, watching them melt into nothingness. This was not possible. I was the only one here. The doors were locked. The windows were secure. I needed to leave. I grabbed my keys, real ones, metal and solid, and headed for the door. Just as I reached for the knob, I hesitated. A thought struck me, unshakable in its weight. What if the keys in the freezer were meant for something? What if they were for a lock I had not found yet? I turned back, my breath unsteady. I had checked everything, but maybe I had missed something. I moved through the house, checking every door, every drawer, every hidden space I could think of. Nothing. Until I reached the basement. I rarely went down there. The air was always heavy, damp, the concrete cold against my feet. But something told me to look. I descended the stairs, my pulse quickening with each step. And then I saw it. A small, rusted lock on the farthest wall, one I did not remember ever seeing before. It was embedded into the bricks, secured tightly as if it had been there forever. My throat tightened. I had no key that fit this lock. But the ice cubes had been shaped like keys. I ran back upstairs, yanking open the freezer door, but it was empty. I had melted them all. A deep unease settled over me. I had been given something, and I had destroyed it without knowing what it was for. I had no idea what lay behind that lock. Maybe it was better that way. I left that house the next day, unable to shake the feeling that I had missed my only chance to know the truth. Some doors, I realized, are meant to stay closed. Story 17. I reached for my wallet as I stood at the counter, ready to pay for my groceries. My stomach dropped when I realized it was not in my bag. I checked my pockets, then my bag again, digging through every compartment, but it was not there. The cashier watched me with polite impatience as I frantically searched. My mind raced as I tried to remember the last time I had seen it. I was sure I had it that morning when I left the house. Embarrassed, I told the cashier I had forgotten my wallet and left the groceries behind. I walked to my car in a daze, my thoughts clouded with confusion. Had I dropped it somewhere? I retraced my steps in my head, but nothing stood out. It had been with me when I locked the front door. I was certain of it. I checked the car, searching under the seats and in the glove compartment, but it was not there either. When I got home, I searched every corner of the house. I checked the kitchen table, the living room, even the bathroom, hoping I had absent-mindedly left it somewhere. It was nowhere to be found. Frustration built in my chest as I sat on the couch, trying to think of what to do next. If I had lost it outside, someone could have picked it up by now. The thought of canceling my cards and replacing everything inside felt overwhelming. I barely slept that night, my mind replaying every possible scenario. I kept wondering if I had been careless, if I had left it somewhere public without realizing it. I did not like the idea that someone else might have it. The next morning I got up early and checked my car again, hoping I had missed it in my exhaustion. It was still nowhere to be found. I walked back into the house, ready to start making calls to cancel my cards. But as I stepped inside, I froze. My wallet was sitting on the kitchen counter. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at it, my hands going cold. It had not been there the night before. I had searched this entire house multiple times, checking every possible place. I knew it was not there. I slowly approached the counter and picked up the wallet, my fingers trembling slightly. The weight felt the same, the texture familiar. I opened it, feeling a mix of relief and dread. My identification and cards were still inside, untouched. But when I checked the cash compartment, every single bill was gone. I stood there in stunned silence, my heart pounding in my chest. Someone had taken it. Someone had entered my home, taken my wallet, removed the cash, and then brought it back. I struggled to make sense of it. If someone had stolen it, why return it? Why not take everything, including my identification and cards? The thought sent a shiver through me. I checked the doors and windows, looking for any signs of forced entry. Everything was locked, just as I had left it. I even checked my security camera, but the footage showed nothing unusual. No one had entered, no movement in or out. It made no sense. I could not shake the feeling that someone had been inside while I slept. The idea of a stranger moving through my home without my knowledge made my skin crawl. I tried to tell myself I had somehow overlooked it the night before, but I knew that was not true. I had searched that counter. I had checked every surface in this house. The wallet had not been there. For the next few days, I found myself double-checking the locks more often. I kept my wallet close, never leaving it out of sight. But the uneasy feeling never fully left. I knew someone had been in my space. They had taken something from me and then returned what was left, as if to remind me they could. I never found out who did it or how they got in. Nothing else ever went missing, but I never felt truly safe in that house again. Eventually, I moved to a new place, hoping to leave that feeling behind. But even now, I always keep my wallet in the same spot, checking it more times than necessary. I never want to wake up to that feeling again. Story 18. The sound of the doorbell jolted me awake. My heart pounded as I sat up, trying to shake off the drowsiness clouding my mind. The clock on my nightstand glowed in the darkness, showing the time as 2 a.m. I held my breath, listening for any other sounds, but the house remained silent. My first thought was that it had been a dream, but I knew I had heard it clearly. I threw off the blanket and swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet meeting the cold floor. My mind raced through possibilities as I made my way to the front door. Maybe it was a mistake, someone ringing the wrong doorbell. Maybe it was a prank, though no one had ever done that before. I peered through the peephole, expecting to see someone standing there. The porch was empty. A chill ran down my spine as I unlocked the door and slowly pulled it open. The street outside was quiet, bathed in the dim glow of the streetlights. I stepped out onto the porch, scanning the area for any movement. There was no sign of anyone. The sidewalk was empty, the neighboring houses dark and still. The wind rustled the trees in the distance, but nothing else moved. I hesitated before stepping back inside. Something about the situation felt wrong, but I could not put my finger on it. I locked the door and double-checked that all the windows were secure before returning to my bedroom. As I lay back down, I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe a malfunction, or someone who had realized their mistake and left before I could answer. Still, sleep did not come easily. The next morning, I checked the doorbell camera. I expected to see at least some movement, maybe a shadow or a figure walking away. The footage showed nothing. The camera had recorded the sound of the doorbell, but there was no one there. I rewound it multiple times, watching the video closely. The timestamp confirmed it had happened at 2 a.m, but there was no sign of anyone pressing the button. I tried to shake off the unease as I went about my day. The rational part of me wanted to believe it was just a glitch. Maybe the button was faulty, or there was interference from another signal. I made a note to check it later, but deep down I could not ignore the nagging feeling that something was off. That night I went to bed feeling restless. I kept my phone close, my mind still replaying the footage. At exactly 2 a.m, the doorbell rang again. My body tensed as I sat up, my breath catching in my throat. I listened for any other sounds but heard nothing. My heart pounded as I reached for my phone and pulled up the live feed from the camera. The screen showed my empty porch, just as it had the night before. No one was there. My stomach tightened as I stared at the image, waiting for something to appear. The seconds dragged on, but the porch remained empty. The doorbell had rung, yet the camera had captured nothing. I forced myself out of bed and crept toward the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. I hesitated before peering through the peephole. The view outside was exactly the same as before. No movement, no sign of anyone. I stood there for several moments, barely breathing, before stepping back. I spent the next hour wide awake, trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. I considered calling someone, but what would I even say? That my doorbell rang on its own 2 nights in a row. It sounded ridiculous, even to me. Eventually exhaustion took over, and I drifted into uneasy sleep. The next day I inspected the doorbell closely. I checked the wiring, tested the button, and even looked for any signs of tampering. Everything seemed normal. I reset the system and made sure the camera was working properly. That night, I went to bed with a sense of unease, unsure of what to expect. At exactly 2 a.m, the doorbell rang again. This time I did not hesitate. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed. The porch was empty, just like before. My hands felt clammy as I watched the screen, my mind racing. I knew I had heard it. The footage even recorded the sound. But there was no movement, no person, nothing that could have triggered it. I stayed awake until morning, too unsettled to sleep. The next day I reached out to the company that made the doorbell. I explained the issue, hoping they could offer a technical reason for what was happening. They assured me that their devices could not ring on their own unless there was a direct trigger. If the button had been pressed, the camera should have captured whoever was there, but it did not. The following night, I sat in my living room, determined to see if it would happen again. I kept all the lights off, my phone in hand, ready to check the feed the moment the sound came. The clock ticked closer to 2, my anticipation growing with every passing minute. Then, right on time, the doorbell rang. I looked at the screen immediately. Nothing. The porch was still, just like before. My breath came in short, uneasy bursts as I forced myself to the door. I placed my hand on the doorknob, hesitating before pulling it open. The night air was cold against my skin. I stepped onto the porch, scanning the street. Nothing. But this time, something was different. A single footprint was visible on the doormat. My stomach clenched as I stared at it. It was fresh, the outline sharp in the dim light. Someone had been there. Someone had pressed the doorbell. But they were gone before I could see them. I stepped back inside, locking the door behind me. My mind raced with possibilities. Someone was doing this intentionally. Someone knew exactly what time to ring the doorbell, knew how to disappear before I could catch them. But why? The following night, I stayed awake again, watching and waiting. 2 in the morning came and went, but the doorbell never rang. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Whoever had been doing this had stopped, or maybe they had realized I was watching. Days passed, and the doorbell never rang at that hour again. I tried to move on, to convince myself it was just a strange prank. But every night, when the clock neared 2 in the morning, I found myself holding my breath, waiting for that sound. It never came again. But I never stopped wondering who had been standing outside my door in the middle of the night. Story 19. When I first noticed it, I almost missed it completely. The hole was small, barely larger than the tip of a pen, positioned low on the wall near the corner of my bedroom. I crouched down, running my finger over the edges. The surface was smooth, precise, as if it had been made deliberately. I felt a tightness in my chest. I had never drilled a hole there. I had no reason to. I lived alone, and I could not think of a single reason why it would be there. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe it had always been there, and I just had not noticed before. Maybe there was an explanation I had not thought of yet. I leaned in closer, trying to see through the hole, but the angle made it difficult. I could only make out darkness on the other side. My heart pounded as I stood up and walked to the other room, the one that shared the wall. I checked the same spot, expecting to find a matching hole. But there was nothing. The wall was intact, smooth, no sign of any opening. That did not make sense. If there was a hole on one side, there should be one on the other. I pressed my palm against the wall, tapping lightly, listening for anything unusual. It sounded solid. I grabbed a flashlight and returned to my bedroom, kneeling beside the hole again. I turned on the light and shined it directly inside. The beam disappeared into the darkness, revealing nothing. No wires, no structural gaps, nothing that should explain why it was there. A shiver ran down my spine. If I had not drilled it, and there was no matching hole on the other side, then who had done it? And why? The thought made my stomach turn. I needed to cover it. I grabbed a small piece of tape from my desk and pressed it firmly over the hole, making sure no light could pass through. That night, I struggled to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought about the hole, about what might be behind it, about why it was there. The feeling of being watched crept into my mind, making my skin crawl. The next morning, I checked the tape as soon as I got out of bed. It was still there, unmoved. I let out a small breath of relief. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe it was nothing. But as I got ready for the day, something gnawed at me. I needed to know for sure. I decided to call someone to take a look at it. Later that afternoon, a contractor arrived, a man who had done some repairs in my home before. I led him to the bedroom, pointing at the spot. He examined the hole closely, frowning as he ran his fingers over it. I told him there was no matching hole on the other side of the wall. He tapped lightly, listening to the sound. Then he looked at me, his expression unreadable. "This was drilled carefully," he said. "It is not random. Someone made this on purpose." His words sent a chill through me. I asked him what might be behind it. He hesitated, then pulled a small tool from his bag. "I can check," he said, "but you might not like the answer." I swallowed hard and nodded. He inserted a thin wire with a small camera attached, feeding it slowly into the hole. He watched the screen closely, his brow furrowing. I could not see what he saw, but I knew from his reaction that something was wrong. He exhaled sharply and pulled the camera out. "There is a space behind your wall," he said. "It is not supposed to be there." My throat went dry. "A space?" I asked. He nodded. "It looks like an empty cavity. Someone might have built it there intentionally." I felt my hands start to tremble. There was not supposed to be any hidden space in my house. I had never done any renovations, never made any changes to the structure. The idea that someone else had, without my knowledge, made my skin crawl. "Do you want me to open the wall?" he asked. I hesitated. A part of me did not want to know, but another part of me needed to. I nodded. "Yes," I said, "open it." He grabbed a small saw and started cutting around the hole, removing a section of the drywall carefully. As he pulled the panel away, we both took a step back. Behind the wall was a small, narrow space, just wide enough for someone to crawl through. Dust and debris clung to the edges, but that was not what made my stomach drop. There was a mattress on the floor. A blanket, crumpled as if someone had used it recently. A half-empty water bottle sat in the corner, next to a small pile of food wrappers. My breath caught in my throat. Someone had been living inside my wall. I took a shaky step backward, my entire body cold with fear. The contractor looked at me, his face pale. "You need to call the police," he said quietly. I could barely move. My mind raced with horrifying thoughts. How long had they been there? How had they gotten in? Had they watched me through that hole? I grabbed my phone and dialed. My hands were shaking as I spoke, barely able to form the words. The officers arrived quickly, examining the space behind the wall. They searched my house, looking for any signs of forced entry, but found none. Whoever had been living there was gone, but the evidence was clear. They had been there recently, watching, listening, hiding just a few feet away from where I slept. That night, I did not stay in my house. I packed a bag and left, staying with a friend until I could figure out what to do next. The thought of being inside those walls again made my skin crawl. The next day, I called a professional to seal off the hidden space permanently. The hole was gone, the wall repaired. I changed every lock, installed security cameras, and double-checked every window. Weeks passed, then months. Nothing else happened. No signs of forced entry, no strange noises in the night, no new holes in my walls. Eventually, the fear faded. I started sleeping soundly again, living without the constant paranoia. But sometimes, late at night, I would lie in bed staring at the wall, wondering if I had truly been alone in my home, or if someone had been there watching me for far longer than I would ever know. Story 20. The moment I saw the notification for a new voicemail, I hesitated. I had not missed any calls, and there was no number listed. A strange feeling settled in my chest as I pressed play. The moment the sound came through, my breath caught. It was my favorite song, playing on loop. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a pocket dial that had accidentally recorded background noise. But as I listened, I noticed something strange. There was no distortion, no background noise, no interruptions. The audio was perfect, as if it had been deliberately recorded and sent to me. I played it again, this time listening closely. The song repeated seamlessly, without skipping or pausing. My skin prickled. Who would send me something like this? And how did they know this was my favorite song? I checked the voicemail details, but there was no caller ID, no timestamp. It was as if the message had appeared out of nowhere. My first thought was that someone I knew was playing a prank, but the more I considered it, the less sense it made. No one had mentioned anything unusual to me, and I had not shared my favorite song with many people. A sudden thought struck me. I opened my music app and checked my playlists. My stomach tightened when I saw the most recent activity. The song had been played multiple times in the past few hours, but I had not opened the app since the previous day. Someone had accessed it. I locked my phone and looked around the room. The air felt heavier, the silence pressing in. I turned on the lights, my pulse quickening. The voicemail kept playing in my mind, the endless loop of the melody echoing in my thoughts. I needed to know who sent it. I decided to test something. I deleted the voicemail and set my phone down. If it happened again, I would have my answer. Hours passed without incident, and I began to relax. Maybe it had been some kind of system glitch. Then, just after midnight, my phone vibrated.